The story of David, a humble shepherd boy with an unwavering faith in God, and Goliath, a towering warrior who struck fear into the hearts of the Israelites. David, though young and inexperienced, was not your ordinary shepherd. Goliath, on the other hand, was a seasoned warrior, a giant of a man who used his size and strength to intimidate and dominate. Two very different warriors, from two very different worlds, yet destined to meet on a battlefield that would change the course of history. Little did they know, their lives were about to intersect in a most dramatic way. In the quiet hills of Bethlehem, a young shepherd named David was tending his flock. Beneath the wide-open sky, David spent his days in solitude, caring for his father's sheep. With no one for company but the bleating flock, the shepherd boy found solace in his solitude. Here, in these seemingly mundane moments, David forged a deep and unshakable faith in God. David was not born into royalty, nor did he possess the physical strength of a seasoned warrior, but what he did have was a heart for God. He was just a shepherd, yet his spirit was mighty. His humble beginnings did not deter him from serving God with all his heart. Instead, these simple roots nourished his faith, making it stronger and more resilient. As he watched over his flock, David developed a particular skill, a skill that would later be known far and wide. He became adept at using a sling, a simple tool used by shepherds to fend off predators and guide their sheep. With a swift and precise flick of the wrist, David could strike a target with deadly accuracy. This skill was not born out of a desire for glory or fame, but out of necessity and duty. Yet it was this humble tool. He was a boy with a heart for God, a sling in his hand and a flock to tend. His faith was his pillar, and his sling, his weapon. Little did he know these elements of his humble life were preparing him for a destiny far greater than he could imagine. Unbeknownst to him, David's faith and his skill with the sling would be put to the ultimate test. Meanwhile, in the Philistine camp, a giant named Goliath was issuing a terrifying challenge. Goliath was not just any giant, he was a behemoth, a towering figure of immense size and strength. His height was 6 cubits and a span, that's about 9 feet 9 inches, a height that would intimidate even the bravest of warriors. He was clad in bronze armor that gleamed under the sun, a sight that was as awe-inspiring as it was frightening. His helmet was forged of the finest bronze, a testament to his might. His coat of mail, weighing 5,000 shekels, was a formidable barrier against any weapon. His bronze javelin was like a weaver's beam, and the iron point of his spear weighed an astonishing 600 shekels. His shield-bearer went before him, further adding to his imposing presence. Each day this giant of a man would step forward from the Philistine ranks and challenge the Israelites. His voice boomed across the valley, echoing off the hillsides, reaching the ears of every Israelite soldier. "Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." The challenge was repeated day after day, and with each repetition, the fear within the Israelite camp grew. Goliath was not just a physical giant, he was also a psychological giant. His very presence, his voice, his challenge, all served to instill fear and despair in the hearts of the Israelite soldiers. They were an army paralyzed by fear, their courage drained by the daunting sight of the Philistine giant. With every passing day, the Israelites' fear grew. Who would dare to face this giant? Enter David, the shepherd boy, who was not afraid. Against the backdrop of fear and despair within the ranks of the Israelite army, David, the youngest son of Jesse, emerged with an unusual sense of courage. His decision to face Goliath was not a spur-of-the-moment act of bravado, but a deliberate choice rooted in unwavering faith and trust in God. What was it that gave David this unexpected courage? Perhaps it was his humble beginnings as a shepherd, where he had to protect his flock from wild animals. Or maybe it was his deep relationship with God, as expressed in the psalms he composed while tending his sheep. But it was more than just experience or faith. It was a unique blend of both, a synergy of the physical and spiritual that prepared David for the challenge ahead. David was not a warrior by any worldly standards. He was a shepherd boy, small in stature, without the build or the battle experience of a soldier. His choice of weapon was a simple sling, a far cry from the sophisticated armor and weaponry of his adversary. Yet, David's courage did not stem from his physical abilities or the strength of his weapons. Instead, it was anchored in his faith in God, his belief in divine protection and justice. He was not deterred by Goliath's imposing stature or his haughty words. Instead, David saw beyond the physical appearance of the giant, recognizing him as a mortal man challenging the authority of the Almighty. In David's eyes, Goliath was not an unbeatable giant. He was a mere obstacle that stood between the people of God and their divine destiny. David's courage was not an act of reckless audacity, it was a manifestation of his faith. It was a testament to his belief that God does not judge by outward appearance, but by the heart. It was a demonstration of his conviction that with God on his side, no enemy, no matter how formidable, could stand in his way. With a simple sling and 5 smooth stones, David stepped onto the battlefield. His courage was unexpected, but it was not unfounded. It was rooted in faith, honed by experience, and fueled by a divine purpose. And as we'll see in the next scene, it was this unexpected courage that would make all the difference. The battlefield fell silent as the shepherd boy faced the giant. The sun was high, casting long shadows on the ground as the two unlikely opponents stood opposite each other. The towering figure of Goliath, with his menacing armor and his spear that was like a weaver's beam, was a formidable sight. Against him stood David, a young shepherd with nothing more than a sling and 5 smooth stones. David's faith was his shield. He was not armored in bronze or iron, but in his unwavering belief in God. He held tightly to his sling, a tool he had mastered over years of protecting his sheep from predators. But today, he wasn't defending a flock, he was standing up for his people, the Israelites. The Philistine giant taunted and ridiculed David, but his words fell on deaf ears. David's focus was unshakable. He had a purpose, a divine mission, and he was not about to be deterred by the giant's intimidating size or his scornful words. With a steady hand, David reached into his pouch, pulling out a stone, smooth and round. He placed it in the pouch of his sling, swinging it over his head as he had done countless times before. His heart was steady, his faith unwavering. He was not alone in this battle. God was with him. With a swift motion, David released the stone. It whirred through the air, a blur against the bright sky. In the span of a breath, the stone found its mark, striking Goliath on the forehead. The giant staggered, his eyes wide in disbelief, and then fell forward with a resounding thud that echoed across the battlefield. The Philistine army watched in stunned silence as their champion fell. The Israelites erupted in cheers, their faith renewed by the shepherd boy who had stood up to a giant and won. And so, with a single stone, David defeated Goliath, proving that with faith, even the seemingly impossible can be overcome. David's victory over Goliath resonated far beyond the battlefield. The defeat of the Philistine giant didn't just mark an end to a physical menace, but also signaled a turning point in the spiritual and political landscape of Israel. David's triumph was not just an act of personal bravery, but a divine testament that catapulted him from a shepherd boy to a revered leader, and eventually, a king. It was a pivotal moment in his life that set the stage for his legacy. But the story of David and Goliath is more than just a historical account. It's a profound lesson in courage, faith, and the power of the underdog. It teaches us that no obstacle is too great if we arm ourselves with faith and the right tools. It shows us that even the most daunting of giants can be toppled by the smallest of stones, if hurled with unwavering belief and precision. And so, the story of David and Goliath reminds us that with faith, courage, and the right tools, anyone can overcome their giants.